So this here is an image of my 1995 Mazda Miata. I actually put power windows in this vehicle because it was manual. It was a 5-speed stick shift. I installed a cloth roof with the glass back window because it was originally vinyl. I put in a JVC car stereo. At one point in time, I broke the key off in the ignition, and before I repaired it myself, I ended up basically rewiring the car to make it push button ignition. So those are just some of the little tweaks that I did on this car before I got rid of it. I paid about 7 grand for it. I wish I never would have sold it, but I did many years later, obviously because I got married and I started having children. Now, the story behind why I purchased this car in the first place was many years ago. I took a motorcycle driving course, and at the end of that course, I graduated and got my M1 license, which I retain to this day. At that time in my life, I was a lot younger, obviously, and so my insurance, both auto and motorcycle, was through the roof, and I didn't have a lot of money back then, so I was unable to get a motorcycle. So I looked into getting like something like a drop top Camaro, drop top Mustang, and the insurance was just cost prohibitive. And since I couldn't get a motorcycle, I just decided, back then, nobody was going to finance me for a motorcycle. I just wasn't in that place, economically. And so to let the wind blow through my hair that I used to have, I went ahead and bought this Mazda Miata. It was a nice compromise because the car insurance was not as high as a Mustang or a Camaro, but I did have a convertible, and this was a very fun car. I loved tinkering with it and just doing all kinds of little things, and I wish that I had it now where my skill set is so much different. Like, I would have painted this car. That I would have took it that far because I actually repainted the hood on my wife's Saab. And anyways, that's neither here nor there. But the reality of the matter is, I had this car because I could not at the time afford to get a motorcycle. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring that up because I ended up in, I want to say it was 2008, around that time. I was actually on a travel contract in Northern California, Mountain View area. Well, actually, no, I think I was in San Francisco at the time. I had finished up, and coming around to that year in 2008, I had this arrangement to where I could actually save a lot of money to be able to, pay down all my debts and get myself financially in a good place. And things fell through. Things didn't work out the way that I had planned. And so the amount of money that I had left over every month was significantly less than what I had hoped it would be. And it kind of knocked me off all my goals. And so I made the very intelligent decision of purchasing my first motorcycle because I was in a different place, economically. I had great credit. I had a strong income. I had already been a nurse for, I guess at that time, 7 or so years, and I was a travel nurse. So when I was in Mountain View, California, I purchased a Yamaha R6. As you can see here, it's yellow with flames. It was a special edition bike, and I had that bike for a week, literally, before someone tried to steal it. And I was living in a facility that had a carport. I had never owned a motorcycle. I didn't realize how valuable they were to thieves, and so I was in my own little world. I bought the motorcycle. About a week later, I woke up in the middle of the night to someone trying to cut the ignition out. I had to pull my piece on the person, and they actually kind of revved up the bike. I guess they thought I was going to jump out of the way, but I didn't, and so it ended up that, of course, they got off the motorcycle and turned it off. And then as they're walking out, unfortunately I had walked out of, come downstairs away from my apartment, and I didn't bring my phone with me. And it was just so weird because I just woke up in the middle of the night and I just felt like something was wrong. I heard this noise and I felt like something was wrong. And normally I would not go get my piece, but I went and got my piece, and I went out there. And of course, if I had not had my piece, the person would have just drove off with my motorcycle. But since I did have my piece at the time, they were unable to drive off with the motorcycle. And I'm like pointing my piece at the person, and the person, has their hands up or whatever. They have on a helmet, and you see the bike is yellow. The person came to steal my bike on with a yellow helmet. Dude came prepared, right? So, anyways, I tried to, usher the guy up to go into my apartment so I could get my phone and call the cops. And of course, he shook his head no, because of course, then, it's kind of like it could be assumed that he broke in, and then, he would be worried about, possibly having some extra, metal in his body. So basically, what I did at that point in time, I reached out my hand to try to flip the helmet off so that I could see what he looked like. And, let me tell you, God intervened at that moment, because as I did that, the clip just fell out of the gun. Both of us looked down, and he just took off running, right? And, I didn't give chase or anything like that. But I was very fortunate, because my back, I didn't realize, was to a vehicle of which the guy was in. And that vehicle, as he ran off, they backed up and kind of drove off. They didn't drive off they didn't drive off fast or anything like that, but they drove off. And I ended up, writing down the license plate, and they ended up eventually catching that guy or whatever. For I don't know whatever happened to him, because I didn't go to court, but they did catch him for trying to steal my motorcycle. So anyways, this motorcycle was in the shop for months, because I actually left from Mountain View, California, and flew down to LA. Well, I drove down to LA for my next contract, which was, in the LA area, obviously. And when I was down there, I met these two guys that actually were from Florida, and both of them had brought out they had Suzuki, maybe Gixxers, I think, that they was riding. And I remember I was talking to them every day, like, oh yeah, I have a motorcycle, da 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 da, how people are when they be, lying. And I'm sure they thought that I was lying, because I was talking about how I had a motorcycle and how, it was in the shop and this and that and the other. So it probably sounded like a fantastic story to them. But anyways, my motorcycle had been in the shop for months, and they kept claiming that they couldn't get the parts because it was brand new and it was a special edition bike. And anyways, I got so fed up, I just bought a plane ticket. I said, look, just put my bike together back the best way you can. I'm coming to get it. By the time I got up there, they had my bike ready. I actually jumped on it. I rode it from the Bay Area all the way down to LA. By the time I got down to LA, let me tell you something, I couldn't even hardly stand up straight, and my backside felt like I was sitting on fire. But anyways, I had the motorcycle for a few days once I got it down there, and I actually took it to work. And of course, I was able to show the fact that I really did have a motorcycle. And it was probably a few days, I know less than a week, someone stopped in front of me on the highway, on the highway down in LA. I want to say it's the 405. I may have that wrong, but I think it was the 405. And I hit the back of a car. It was stop and go traffic, so it wasn't that fast, but I hit the back of a car, flipped over onto my back onto the highway, right? I didn't realize at the time that was when I got injured. I just picked up the bike, and it had some damage on it. Of course, I was, completely upset, because I hadn't owned the bike, for that long, and I had only ridden it, I hadn't even ridden a motorcycle for 30 days. Combined, because of it being in the shop and the previous, assault on the bike when someone tried to steal it. And so I took the bike home. I got in my car. At that time, I had a I don't know, I think it was a 2006 or 2000 something Pontiac G6. And I went to work. And that whole night, I was on the internet looking up, motorcycles. And I looked up and I found, I think it was Glendale Harley Davidson dealership. And when I got off in the morning, I used to work 7 p to 7 in the morning, and I got up at 7 in the morning, when I got off of work at 7 in the morning, I drove home, and then I took public transportation all the way to the Glendale Harley Davidson dealership. And when I got off work, or when I got there, I signed up and I purchased another. It was a 2008 special edition Harley Dyna. You can see the image here. I purchased that, and so by this time I'm like, I think dang near 30 G's deep into debt in regards to motorcycles or whatever at this time in my life. And eventually I ended up fixing the Yamaha R6 myself. I ordered the parts and I installed them myself. I didn't feel comfortable putting it back in the shop after it being kept in the shop for so long. And so for a very, very, very short season in my life, I was really feeling myself because I had my car. I wasn't even, obviously I'm not from LA, I was from the Midwest, and I had my house in the Midwest. But because I was on contract in LA, I chose not to take the travel nurse housing, and I chose to just sign a lease, and I got me an apartment in downtown LA. So I was, down there, and I had my car, and I had two motorcycles, right? I didn't think that through. I didn't think about how I was going to get those motorcycles back to the Midwest where my house was. I was, in a different headspace at that time. So anyways, I'm just riding around, and there was this guy, there was a lady that worked in my apartment complex, and she knew this guy, and he actually had a Ducati. And so me, him, and some other fella, I don't know who he was, we would go riding, and I would switch back to riding my Harley and ride my my R6, and I'm, riding around LA, going to Venice Beach and all these different places, and it's just a group of us. So in one hand, I was riding with the boys from Florida and their Suzuki Gixxers, and then on the other hand, I'm riding with, the one guy that I met who was, I guess, from LA, and Ducati, and one of his other buddies, and I'm just having like the time of my life, riding bikes and stuff like that. Well, one day, I was actually, so I worked at a particular facility in West LA. I had a contract there, but I used to work a lot of extra back then. So I worked extra at UCLA Medical Center, right? And while I was down there, I actually, I worked one evening and I got off and I was riding my Yamaha R6, and I had just got on the highway over there, really close to UCLA, and I went to go. There was this area where you get on the highway, and then you have to quickly get across traffic to get on this off ramp to go back downtown. And so I just gunned it. So first and foremost, I always wore my motorcycle gear, and on this particular day, I was thinking, you know what? I might not wear my motorcycle gear. I might just leave it in my backpack and just ride, naked. But something told me, nah, put on your motorcycle gear. So I put on my pants, I put on my jacket, obviously had on my helmet, but I left my gloves off for some reason, right? So I get on my motorcycle, I get off, and I shoot up, and I gunned it, like I was like probably going like 70 as I crossed traffic. And then when I was going to go around the circle about to go onto the other highway, I just noticed that the cars were backed up. And I hit it too fast, so I hit the brake to try to stop and slow down, and everything just went slow motion. And the back end of the motorcycle started to come around, and the next thing you know, I don't know everything that happened, but somehow I think my knee went down first, but I hit the ground, and the motorcycle probably flew I don't know, 10, 15 feet off in one direction, maybe further. Slid off, and I went flying and sliding on the ground, and my head got lodged up under the back of the car that was in front, that I was coming up on. And at first I couldn't get up, but then I was thinking about it, and there was this doctor that I knew. She was a female doctor, whatever, and we were pretty cool back then. But One of the things I know in trauma, whenever you have a trauma, and they want to test to make sure your spinal tack that your nervous system is intact, right? That you didn't break any kind of vertebrae or anything like that. One of the things they do to test you is they stick a finger in your rectum to check for rectal tone, right? And that particular doctor that I knew, she was on staff that night, and when I left, she came in, and I was like, yeah, nobody's violating me like that. So, at first I couldn't get up, but afterwards I got up, and and the guy behind me actually came, and he helped me lift the bike up. And when we lift the bike up, the guy's like, oh, I thought you were dead or whatever, and the handlebar on the bike was broken off. The As soon as I set the bike up, the crankcase, the motorcycle had slid so violently and so far that the crankcase had like burned a hole in it, and there's this oil pouring out on the ground or whatever. So I walked the bike to the side of the road, and then my knee was hurting, and I just basically walked down the hill, and there was this kind of like a diner or something like that over there. I don't know what it was, but I walked in there, and at that time I had been on this fast where I hadn't drank soda for years. And I just walked in there, and I ordered the biggest, like either Coca-Cola or Pepsi that they had, and drank it. And I ended up calling up a girlfriend that I knew from LA at that time, and she came and picked me up and dropped me off at my apartment in downtown LA. Never went to the hospital for it. And I remember the police came to my apartment in the middle of the night, and they because they thought that they was looking at me in area hospitals because they thought the driver was dead, right? So anyways, kind of wrapping the motorcycle part up, I left the motorcycle there, and I kind of thought it was like my state in the Midwest, where if you leave a car on the side of the road, they just take it and it's gone, totaled, and you never hear from it again. Not in California. Jumping around in the story, later I ended up getting some huge, like, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 bill for storage for that particular motorcycle. And anyway, so that was the end of the Yamaha R6. I never saw it again after that. So I would still ride my Harley from here and there. One day I went to one of the malls down in LA, and I parked it in a parking spot, and someone must not have seen that it was in the parking spot, and they, I guess, backed in and they bent the back fender in. Of course, I never got that fixed, but it's a little bit of a bent on there. I just didn't have a great time with motorcycles. However, I did like to ride them. I mean, as I said, I bought a motorcycle. I got my motorcycle license when I was fairly young, and this was the first time that I ever really had a true opportunity to ride a motorcycle. And this whole thing with motorcycle riding, and the issues that I had all happened definitely within like 6 months, right? So I did not have a long lifespan of riding motorcycles. Now, the irony is, so my contract had ended at the hospital that I was working with in LA, and I still had my apartment and my lease, and I was planning on staying in LA longer. And so I had negotiated a contract with a hospital that was downtown in LA. And then my travel recruiter comes to me and says, hey, you need to go get a physical. So I'm like, sure. I go in and I have my shirt off, and the doctor's like, oh, you have an umbilical hernia. You can't lift more than 10 pounds. So that led to me losing my contract. And at that time, I was like, I had, 2 motorcycle payments, a car payment. I had my house in the Midwest, and then I had my apartment in downtown LA. And I'm like, man, I don't even have a job. So what I ended up doing was, when I was doing moonlighting at UCLA and and other hospitals in the area down in LA, that was not connected to the job that I was no longer, the contract that I lost. So I just worked to fulfill my obligations, to pay off my lease in LA and all of that. And I ended up having surgery at Cedars-Sinai Hospital on Halloween in 2008. And as a result, I ended up being off of work for like a month, and that was when the housing crisis occurred and the financial issues was going on, and so it was very difficult for me to go back to getting a job. Long story short, obviously I went through financial ruin. I ended up getting my Harley Davidson repoed. I never saw the R6 again, though I did get a bill for it later, and all the way up until, well, you know, that whole time of being off, during that time that I was off and I had difficulty finding a job, I had a little bit of money set aside, and I actually went to Trinidad and Tobago. And it's so funny because back in the day, I was at my homeboy's house in San Francisco, and we was watching an R. Kelly video. It's called Slow Wine, and it's like, I guess he's in Jamaica in that video. And I remember just watching that video, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get me a Caribbean girl. It's just a random thought, right? And so during my time off, I actually went to Trinidad, and I spent like 2 months there. That's where my wife is from or whatever. So I got to know her there, and then of course that's history. But had I not had that motorcycle accident, I would have never, because I was not a person that took time off work. I wasn't a big vacation type of person for the most part. And so it took me having to be set down. It took me having a motorcycle accident and not being able to find work for me to actually just sit back and just kind of chill for a bit. And I spent 2 months in Trinidad and was going to actually move there and practice nursing there, but it didn't work out. So my wife ended up coming here. And so the rest is history on that. So obviously I've been married now for many years. I have my oldest is 13 years old, and so the economy's bad. And as I uploaded my other video and I talked about my Saab being down, we have 2 vehicles, both of them are used and old. And so I went back to my wife. I said, because I've been having this itch for a while. I was like, you know what? I want to get me another motorcycle, And it's perfect because they take less gas, and so on and so forth. And I would love to have the wind flow over my bald head at this season. Well, my wife was not really feeling that because she was worried about losing me to, whether it be injury or death. And, people like myself, people that ride motorcycles, that like riding motorcycles, they don't really look at life from that standpoint. And it's very difficult to look at another person or look through the lens of someone else, especially when you don't want to. So I kept presenting my case in multiple ways, and I even was kind of bringing it up at times on my job, my wife doesn't want me to get a motorcycle, blah, 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 blah. And a couple of my coworkers chimed in and said, yeah, you don't need to get a motorcycle. You got kids and this and that and the other. I'm like, you know what? I'm not really trying to hear that. So anyways, day comes, and within, I want to say a 4-hour span, definitely within an 8-hour span, I got to meet 2 people when I was thinking about getting a motorcycle. Just recently, 2 people within an 8-hour span, both of them giving me their testimonies about how they really got messed up riding a motorcycle. One of them, I saw that they had history of a tracheostomy, which is a tube that goes into the neck, and he mentioned how he had multiple surgeries and metal all in his body and still is recovering. And the next one was a gentleman that lost one of his legs. So I am a man of faith, and I'm gonna take that for what it is. So from this day forward, and this is on record on YouTube, I will no longer be looking to get a motorcycle or to ride a motorcycle again. My time was short-lived. I did love it. It was amazing, but it's not for me. Thanks for taking time to listen to the video, and I'll see you in my next one.